Boyfriend had just inherited his aunt's house after she passed away. She was blind, so the house had speakers and wires around telling her, "Back door open, fridge open, back room window opened." Honestly, the robotic voice kind of freaked Carrie out, so the couple had to go through the house and remove tons of wires. After moving in, they got a puppy, and it was nice not being alone. Her boyfriend had to leave for the weekend because of work, so she stayed home. One day, Carrie was out walking with her puppy, and he started wagging near the fence. She turned, thinking he was making friends with a bird or critter again. But it was a man, tall, chubby, and unkempt, grinning at them. "What a cool dog!" he shouted. "Thanks, he's a Native American Indian dog," she responded. "Oh, I have a rare breed too, see?" He then proceeded to point at a small Shih Tzu dog. "I see. Cool, you have a good one." Carrie started feeling uneasy. "Why don't I come over and let our dogs meet? Maybe we can do play dates. You're new in town, right? 'Cause the old lady there died?" Upset that he mentioned her boyfriend's aunt, and she was scared he wanted to come over. "I'm sorry, but I'm not looking to make friends right now. Have a good one." "Oh, come on, anytime's a good time to make new friends." And he proceeded to start bolting around the corner towards her direction. Carrie panicked. She grabbed her puppy from the ground and rushed to the house, locking all the doors. All exterior doors locked. House secure. Wait, I thought I removed all the wires. She hid behind the kitchen counter as it was the only place in the house with the windows and doors couldn't see. The puppy got angry and started nibbling her, but she made sure not to let him go because she was afraid this man wanted to steal her puppy. She hears someone opening her back gate to the yard and she sees him. The man with the Hawaiian shirt is out there. He started looking at the windows and sliding door on the porch that looked into the kitchen. He tried the sliding door, grunting angrily when it wouldn't open. She was looking for her phone but realized that it was actually in the porch and she hoped he wouldn't notice. Front door opened, unsecured, and immediately heard banging and scratching. She took this chance to make her way out to the sliding back door to grab her phone and ran back and locked it again. "Oh, there you are, I see you now." She just locked it, so it was okay, but she didn't know if he was going to shatter the glass. She held her phone up and said, "I called the police. They're on their way, and my cameras have your face, so please leave." He smiled and said, "You haven't called anyone yet. All I wanted was to play with your dog. You're such a tease." Carrie called 911 while he watched. She requested help, and they asked her to stay on the phone. He smiled. He held his hands up and left. The dispatch sent someone out and she gave them a picture from her phone. However, the next day there was no news of capture even though they said they would update her. So she stepped outside and there he was, standing in the other yard, smiling at her. "Hey, you wanna play today then?" He began laughing loudly. She ran inside, put her puppy away, and called the police again, and they said it would take time to arrive since last time it was a false alarm. Front screen door opened, unsecured. She ran to the sliding door and it was unlocked. She quickly locked it and heard banging on the side door. Carrie called her last hope for help, her boyfriend's mother who lived a couple blocks down. The woman was a black belt and a boxer. She called her crying and the mother rushed over and all she heard from her kitchen was the scream, "If you don't leave, I'll be forced to take you down." She looked out her curtain and saw her and the man outside. He was holding something shiny in his back pocket. Her boyfriend's mother suddenly grabbed the man and kicked him in the ribs as hard as she could and made him drop to the ground. She screamed at Carrie and to call the cops again. "Tell them he has a knife, they'll come quicker." The cops arrived soon after and the man was arrested. Carrie asked them what he was doing. Was he planning to hurt my puppy? The officer told her, "You're naive if you thought this man wanted your puppy. He was after you, miss. He's a wanted criminal." Apparently, he was a suspect they couldn't find until now. Her boyfriend's mom stayed with Carrie over the night to make sure she was okay. A few days later, her boyfriend came back home, and he was updated on everything that happened. He proceeded to put up cameras and more security. He even put the speakers back into the house as well, as that voice was actually able to help protect Carrie that horrifying weekend.
I used to work the graveyard shift at a Dunkin' Donuts. For those of you who don't know what a Dunkin' Donuts is, it's basically a donut chain that sells coffee, breakfast items, and of course, donuts. This brings me to a little over a month ago when our location was recently selected to become 24 hours. A lot of other establishments would maintain a 24-hour drive-through window, but ours was fully open. I'll be honest, it was interesting to see the new types of customers who would come in during these hours. We of course had the hipsters and goths who had nothing better to do at 3 a.m. than to sit in a coffee shop drinking 1 cup for an hour. There were the occasional overworked businessmen and interns, trying desperately to finish that last-minute presentation. A couple weeks ago, I had encountered a new type of customer, though he is very difficult to describe. Have you ever met someone that makes you nervous for some unknown reason? Well, at around 2:30 a.m., a man walked in with a large overcoat, with the collar pulled up, and a black beanie on his head. What struck me as odd first was the lack of people in our lobby. Normally at this time, we'd have the goths huddled in the corner cursing the system or something. But the entire store was empty aside from this man, myself, and my manager who was in the back, probably sleeping or something. After this person walked in, I thought it had to be a homeless man, trying to escape the cold and possibly seek out a hot cup of pity. But then I saw his face. He was somewhat gaunt, but cleanly shaven. His eyes had dark circles around them as if he were tired, but he seemed quite energized. He then walked up to the counter. At that moment, I realized how tall this guy was. Like Kobe tall. I asked him what he would like to order. He just stared straight ahead as if he were zoning out. I repeated my question a bit louder. He only said one word. Coffee. The man then leaned down and looked me in the eye and asked me if I was alone. I told him I wasn't, that my manager was in the back room. He then pulled out a few crumpled up dollar bills, handed it to me, and then walked back out of the door without taking his coffee with him. As soon as he left the building, I felt this intense atmosphere lift up from around me. I was at a loss for words, to be honest. I quickly rushed to the back and told my manager about the whole situation, to which he told me to put the man's money aside in case he comes back for it. The next night, everything was back to normal. The usual customers sat in their respective seats, sipping their coffee. While I was keeping myself busy and mopping the floor, I couldn't help but think about the interaction I had last night. That's when I happened to look out of our front window. And I saw him. He was standing across the street under a streetlight. He was just standing there, staring at me. I turned to see if my manager was behind the counter, and when I looked back, he was gone. At that point, I was starting to feel unnerved. My last night working there was the worst by far. And also the reason I quit. I had arrived to work and relieved the people working before me. That's when I received a call from my manager telling me that he had a family emergency and would be a few hours late. I was upset, but there wasn't much I could do, so I just said all right. After 3 uneventful hours of me cleaning the same racks over and over again to keep my mind off things, I glanced out of the window once more. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. The man was standing on the other side of the window. He was grinning at me with a sinister smile that caused my body to seize up. Right away, I pulled out my cell phone and called the police. While my phone was ringing, the man did something strange. Without peeling his eyes from the glass, he pulled out a cell phone from his pocket. I watched him carefully as he began to type something into the phone without even looking at it. At that moment, my phone buzzed, notifying me of a text. The message said, "Now you're alone."
On a cold, dark night, around 2 a.m, a young man and his father sat in a remote 24-hour diner waiting to be served. The older man who was sadly, slowly going senile, had insisted on going out for some soup. Not having the energy to argue, the son took him out, for at least this way his father would be happy, and then he could get some peace and quiet. The waiter walked over, welcomed them to the diner, and then asked if they were ready to order, to which they replied they were. The waiter recommended for them to try the burgers. Best in the West, he said, with a smile that made their skin crawl. They declined and proceeded to order what they came for. The old man ordered tomato soup, and the son a coffee. When the waiter walked away, the son asked his father if he had thought the waiter looked familiar. Not surprisingly, the father said he had never seen him before. But why? He asked. The son proceeded to tell him that he thought he looked a lot like a man he saw on the news that was wanted for murder in another state, but he could easily be mistaken. This made the father quite uncomfortable, so he told his son to shut up and change the subject. Instead, the son then got up, told his father he was going to the bathroom and would be back in a minute. The father waited and waited. Almost 15 minutes had passed, and his son hadn't returned. He also hadn't seen the waiter again. Where was his son? And where was his soup? Just as he finished asking himself this, the waiter appeared with the soup. "Well, you took your time with that," the old man said. "I'm sorry, sir," said the waiter. "We had some issues in the kitchen." "Where's my son?" the old man asked the waiter. "Oh, I'm sure he's not far. I have a feeling you'll be seeing him really soon." And with this he placed the bowl down on the table with a smile that would have given anyone the creeps. The old man turned to his soup and then dipped his spoon in to take his first mouthful. As he lifted the spoon, something else came with it. Some glasses. What the hell? He thought to himself. A horrible chill ran through his body when he realized whose glasses they were. His son's. The old man looked across at the waiter and was overcome with rage when he saw the waiter's sickly grin staring back at him. He grabbed a knife, leapt out of his seat, and stabbed the waiter in the chest. The blade went straight through his heart, and while bleeding profusely all over the floor, he died. Right at this moment, the son appeared from the kitchen and screamed at his father, "No! What have you done? It was a prank! We were playing a prank!" The old man couldn't believe what he was hearing. A prank? But he's a... Oh my God, he thought to himself as the reality quickly set in. I've killed him. The father and son had to act quickly. They grabbed the body and decided to stash it in the cool room to buy them some time. They would then clean the floor and disappear as if they had never been there. Perfect, they thought. There were no witnesses and no one to stop them. Well, that's what they thought, until they slid back the door to the cool room and were greeted by a sight so shocking it made both of them wish they were dead. They had disturbed the waiter's brother, hard at work, making meat for burgers. The best in the West, apparently. Not that they would ever know.
Back when Sarah was 17, she worked at a small local bakery. There were less than 15 employees spread across all the night and day shifts, so they only had a few people working during the day. One of these people was Dave, the delivery driver. From the first time they met, Dave immediately gave Sarah an off vibe. He was in his mid-50s and way too friendly to a teenage girl. But the boss told her that yes, he could be annoying, but no one worked harder than he did, so just ignore his antics. Sarah then recalled that when she signed the paperwork, they never asked her to submit a background check, and in hindsight, that should have been red flag number 2. Over the course of the year or so that she worked with Dave, Sarah tried very hard to ignore him. He was rarely outright creepy, but he was always just a bit too friendly. He would stick around long after his shift was over to talk to her and another pastry chef. He always wanted to lick the bowl after she finished making Rice Krispie treats. He would always stand in front of the racks or equipment or ingredients just enough that sometimes her hand would brush him while reaching for something. Dave always stood just a little too close. Dave was constantly asking Sarah about her life, what she liked, what she did for fun, if she had a boyfriend. Almost daily, he would tell her how a nice girl like her should have a boyfriend, how maybe a boyfriend would be good for her. Sarah let this slide because sometimes older people can say things that were meant differently in their time. But then it was the concert invites. Every other week he had tickets to one concert or another. Once he figured out Sarah's favorite genre of music, it was almost exclusively tickets to bands she desperately wanted to see. But she also knew that she should not go anywhere with him. Then her birthday came. He bought her a t-shirt and it was 2 sizes too small. He told her to try it on after work and text him a photo, and proceeded to give Sarah his phone number. He didn't ask for her number. She said no. He asked the other pastry chef for her number, but she had her back and refused as well. He also brought 2 tickets from another band that Sarah had been wanting to see. VIP section, 21 plus only. He said he could get her in. She just had to go with him and him alone. This continued for a while. Sarah brought it up to one of her bosses, but they laughed it off as, oh, classic Dave. When he wanted a hug on his birthday and hugged her without consent, there's Dave for you. Offering to get her booze or pot, oh, Dave, you scamp. When he pulled up his shirt and showed his abdominal scar from a snowboarding accident, well, that's just Dave. No respect for boundaries, but he was a good worker. Sarah even considered having one of her big strong male friends come in under the guise of being her boyfriend just to placate Dave. She was repulsed by him, but he hadn't really done anything to classify himself as a predator. Besides asking for her number, he had never tried to straight up harass her, and besides the odd hug or two that she was too shy and afraid to refuse, he hadn't gotten super physical. Then one day, Dave was gone. His name disappeared from the employee roster. Sarah's boss asked to see her in the office. She informed her that Dave was no longer employed at their business. Dave had been fired. He was fired because Dave was a convicted sex offender. There is one count kidnapping a minor from the mid-90s and another count that she doesn't want to think about. They had never background checked him, and when they contacted a friend in the police department, they found out that Dave had been lying on lots of paperwork, hiding the fact that he was a convicted felon and not notifying anyone when he moved. Once they brought this information to the police department's attention, they had a few more charges to add. They found out because apparently he had been stalking and harassing one of the clients he delivered to. After his termination, Dave showed up to work one day. He had a weapon with him, but Sarah never found out what he had. They told him to leave or the police would be called, and he ended up leaving in handcuffs. Sarah was extremely relieved that she wasn't there that day. It's been a while since she worked at the bakery, but sometimes she still thinks about how badly things could have gotten had she gone to even one of those concerts with him.
So, last night I was in my living room reading some stories about the black-eyed children and the real-life men in black. It was around 2:30 in the morning and my dog went to the door like he had to go out. I started to get up and he started growling at the door. He has never growled at anything in his life. He's only 6 months old. Then my other dog jumped up onto the couch, trembling and whining. She's a year old. Needless to say, this unnerved me, since I was reading about creepy stuff and was already a little freaked out. So I just sat back on the couch and held my older dog, trying to calm her down. Then a knock came on the door. Usually, my dogs go wild, barking and whining excitedly because they love people, but my 6-month-old puppy ran away from it and came over by me. At this point, my heart was racing, and I was just terrified. All the lights in my house were off, and the curtains were drawn. I don't have a peephole, so I peeked out through the blinds of the window behind me that overlooked the porch. There were 2 boys standing there. One looked to be around maybe 5. He was really little, and the other one was about 10, I'd say. They had their heads down and were wearing winter clothes, heavy jackets. I thought this was weird because it's in the middle of summer. Then they both turn and look up at me. I don't have a bulb on my porch light, so I couldn't see their faces, but they looked directly at the window. This freaked me out even more, so I moved away from the window and just sat on my couch. I couldn't believe that this was happening. I had heard that if you knew about them, then they would visit you. Then one of them spoke.
"Ma'am, can you let us in? It's really cold out here and my brother is hungry."
I didn't move, and I didn't reply. I was immediately alarmed because I had no idea how they knew I was a ma'am. I just sat there on my couch. What the hell would two young kids be doing out at this time of night anyway? Plus, it's June in Alabama. It isn't cold by any means. I had read stories, and I thought, nope, not gonna answer the door, fuck this.
"Ma'am, please let us in. I saw you through the window. I know you're there. It will only take a moment."
I was like, okay, what the fuck? A moment? What kids say that? I was frozen in fear and just refused to answer them at all. I waited for them to go away and didn't dare look out my window because I just knew that they were right next to it and would be staring back at me with pitch black eyes. Then, after a few seconds of silence, they started pounding on my window, and I heard the same voice again.
"Let us in, please, it's cold. We have to call our mum. She'll be worried if we don't call her."
At this point, I was almost in tears. Just sat back against the arm of my couch and held my legs up to my chest. There was no way I was answering that fucking door. I stayed that way for about half an hour until I was sure that they were gone and everything was quiet. I never saw these kids' eyes. I have no idea for sure if they were black-eyed children, but I definitely believe that they were. I grabbed my phone and called my friend, who had suggested I read the stories, and woke her up and begged her to come stay the night with me. After I told her what happened, she agreed right away. About 15 minutes later, she still wasn't here. I started to get worried, because she only lives on the next street over. I saw headlights in my driveway and looked out the window. I saw her get out of the car and run to my door, banging on it. I let her in immediately, and she was crying, and had this terrified look on her face and said,
"You aren't going to believe this, but I swear to God, I just encountered the two kids you told me about."
She said she was at a stop sign and checked her phone for a second when this kid knocked on her window. It startled her, so she looked up and strangely, the street lights were out, so she couldn't see his face, but there was another younger kid behind him. She cracked the window open, already apprehensive, and said,
"Can I help you?"
And the kid said,
"Give us a ride."
in a demanding, overly confident voice for a child. She didn't say anything, and the kid stepped toward her car, and he was close enough now that she noticed he had jet black eyes, wall-to-wall black, no white. She said she wanted to drive away immediately, but felt like she was being pulled into his stare, almost opening her door before she snapped out of it. She gunned the gas pedal and went straight to my house. We stayed up the rest of the night together. According to the stories, they usually pay you more than one visit, so I'm going to take a shit ton of melatonin and knock myself out tonight to try and sleep right through, in case they decide to come again. Believe me or not, this really happened, right here in Huntsville. Lock your doors and windows and ignore any child that comes to your door asking for help, especially if it's at night.